Every year, research teams travel to my island to ask the same question. Why do the people here grow old so slowly? Not slowly in the way you might imagine, creaking joints, foggy minds, bodies that gave up on movement decades before the heart did. Slowly in almost every measurable way. Researchers who study aging at the cellular level, the wear and tear that shows up in our blood, our arteries, the tiny protective caps on the ends of our chromosomes called telomeres, have long pointed to Okinawa as one of the places where that wear appears to accumulate more gently than almost anywhere else on record. I am not going to stand here and hand you a single magic number because no honest person can. But researchers who study this island keep circling back to the same idea. It was never only about what we ate, it was just as much about what we quietly avoided and, more importantly, what we did instead. What makes this useful to you isn't the island itself. You don't need to move here, and I'm not asking you to. What's useful is that researchers have been able to compare fairly directly a population that largely avoided these 7 foods for most of the last century against populations that didn't. And look at what changed once younger generations here started eating more like the rest of the world. Rates of certain chronic conditions have shifted alongside that dietary change, in the same direction you'd expect. That comparison is really the heart of everything I'm about to show you, not a mystery ingredient, but a fairly measurable pattern of what was and wasn't on the plate. Today, I want to show you 7 of those foods and exactly what to do about each one, starting with your very next meal. Not because they are poison, I do not believe in poison foods, but because a lifetime of leaning away from these 7 things and toward the plain, humble food of this island is part of a pattern researchers keep finding in the places where people age the most gracefully. One thing before I begin, every single day you wait to change what's on your plate is a day these 7 foods keep doing what they've always done to a body. I have gathered the complete eating pattern, the full list, the daily rhythm, the recipes, into the Okinawa Longevity Protocol for less than the cost of the sugary drink most people buy without a second thought. It is pinned in the comments if you would like it now. Let us begin. The first food is refined sugar. Not the sugar found naturally inside a piece of fruit, but the white, processed sugar poured by the spoonful into packaged snacks, sauces, and drinks. In the traditional Okinawan kitchen, sweetness came from the vegetable itself, a steamed purple sweet potato, naturally sugary on its own, never from a bag with a cartoon on the front. Researchers studying blood sugar and inflammation have long pointed to diets low in added refined sugar as one factor associated with slower metabolic aging. Here is exactly how to start tonight. Steam 3 or 4 sweet potatoes at once on a Sunday and keep them in the refrigerator all week. When a sugar craving hits, eat one cold or reheated, plain or with a small pinch of cinnamon, before you reach for anything packaged. If you want something sweeter still, 1 square of dark chocolate, 80% cacao or higher, satisfies the craving with a fraction of the sugar of a candy bar. That's the entire swap, nothing complicated, nothing you need to buy from a specialty store. One more practical tip. Refined sugar hides under dozens of names on ingredient labels. Cane syrup, dextrose, maltose, corn syrup solids, and a dozen others that all mean the same thing. If any of these appear in the first 3 ingredients of something you're about to buy, that's your signal. And if you're used to sweetening your own tea or coffee, try cutting the amount by half for 1 week before removing it entirely. Your palate adjusts faster than you'd expect, usually within 10 days. The second food is heavily processed packaged snacks, the kind built to last for months on a shelf rather than to nourish a body in a single day. These foods are usually built from refined grains, added sugar, and industrial oils, engineered for shelf life rather than nutrition. Here is a simple test you can use in the store today. If a food needs a list of ingredients longer than the meal itself to explain what is inside it, put it back on the shelf. For an actual replacement, keep 3 things stocked at all times. A bowl of washed cut vegetables at eye level in your fridge, a container of edamame or roasted chickpeas, and a bag of unsalted nuts. When you feel the urge to snack, one of those 3 should be within arm's reach before anything from a bag is. The habit isn't willpower, it's making sure the easy option is the good one. To make roasted chickpeas yourself, it takes 10 minutes of hands-on time. Pat a can of chickpeas completely dry, toss with a teaspoon of oil and a pinch of salt, and roast at 400 degrees for 25 to 30 minutes, shaking the pan halfway through until they're crisp. They keep in an airtight container for about a week, which means one batch covers your whole snacking week. Portion them into small containers on Sunday, the same way you did the sweet potatoes, so the decision is already made before hunger shows up. The third food is red meat, eaten in the quantities common in much of the modern world today. I want to be precise here, because this one surprises people. My island does eat pork, especially at celebrations, but traditionally in small amounts, occasionally, not as the center of every daily plate. Large studies, including the long-running Adventist health studies out of Loma Linda University, have observed lower rates of certain chronic diseases among populations who eat little red meat and lean more heavily on plants, legumes, and fish. Here is how to apply this practically. Pick 2 or 3 days this week and plan a meal around tofu, beans, or fish instead of red meat, not as a punishment, simply as a swap. A simple one to start with. Replace ground beef with firm tofu, crumbled and pan-seared, in anything you'd normally use mince for: tacos, a stir-fry, a pasta sauce. Most people cannot tell the difference once it's seasoned the same way. To prepare tofu so it holds up like meat, press a block of firm tofu under a weight for 15 minutes to remove excess water. Crumble it by hand and pan-sear it in a hot, lightly oiled pan for 5 to 7 minutes until the edges turn golden and slightly crisp. Season it exactly the way you'd season ground beef. The spices are doing most of the work either way. If fish is easier for your week, aim for 2 servings, choosing something simple like grilled salmon or whitefish with a squeeze of citrus, which needs no more than 10 minutes under a broiler. Before I go further, inside the Okinawa Longevity Protocol, I also share the exact weekly rhythm my family follows, including which days lean toward fish, which lean toward tofu, and which are saved for something richer. Every week you follow the old pattern by guesswork instead of the actual rhythm is a week you're leaving results on the table. It's pinned in the comments right now for less than you'll spend on lunch today. Now, 4 more foods. The 4th food is refined white flour, white bread, white pasta, and the pastries built from it. Refined flour has had much of its natural fiber stripped away during processing, which researchers have linked to faster spikes in blood sugar compared to whole grains. The traditional Okinawan diet leaned instead on rice, sweet potato, and whole soy foods like tofu. The easiest swap? Next time you're at the store, look for pasta or noodles labeled 100% buckwheat. This is soba, and it behaves very differently in the body than refined white pasta. For bread, look for a loaf where a whole grain, not enriched wheat flour is the first ingredient listed. That one label check takes 5 seconds and changes what you're actually buying. For rice, the same logic applies. Brown rice, or a mix of brown and white, keeps more of the fiber intact than white rice alone, and cooks the same way, just with about 10 extra minutes of simmering time and slightly more water. If you eat a lot of sandwiches, an easy first step is switching just your bread, since that's usually the single largest source of refined flour in a typical week, without needing to touch pasta or rice at all yet. The fifth food is deep-fried food, the kind cooked in heavy batter and reused oil, common in modern fast food. This is different from a quick stir-fry in a small amount of oil, which our kitchens have always used. Heavily fried, batter-coated food is calorie-dense, and some research suggests frequent consumption is associated with increased inflammation over time. At home, this is simple to fix. Cook with a tablespoon of oil in a hot pan instead of submerging food in a deep fryer, and lean on simmering and steaming for anything that doesn't need a sear. If you're eating out, a good rule of thumb is 1 fried meal a week at most. Treat it as a treat rather than a default. If you're craving something crisp, an air fryer gets you close to the texture of fried food with a fraction of the oil. Toss vegetables or thin-cut potato in a teaspoon of oil and run them at 400 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes, shaking the basket halfway through. For stir-frying, use an oil with a high smoke point, like avocado or a light sesame oil. Keep the pan genuinely hot before food goes in, and work in small batches so everything sears instead of steaming in its own liquid. The sixth food is heavy dairy, large amounts of cheese, cream, and butter, common in many Western diets. Traditional Japanese and Okinawan cooking used very little dairy, leaning on soy, tofu, miso, edamame for protein instead. Some nutrition researchers have studied populations with lower dairy fat intake and found associations with different patterns of cardiovascular markers, though this remains an area of ongoing research rather than settled fact. A practical way to start: pick one meal a day where you'd normally reach for cheese or cream and replace it with simmered tofu and broth instead. To make miso soup at home, bring 2 cups of water to a gentle simmer. Whisk in 2 tablespoons of miso paste off the heat so it doesn't lose its flavor to boiling. Then add cubed soft tofu and a sliced scallion. It takes under 5 minutes and delivers real protein without the saturated fat of cream or cheese. If you're concerned about calcium, since dairy is where most people get theirs by default, know that it's easy to find elsewhere. A cup of cooked edamame, a serving of leafy greens like bok choy, or calcium-set tofu. Check the label. Some brands use it, some don't. All carry meaningful amounts. You don't need to give up dairy completely to shift the overall balance of your week, just to stop treating it as the only option at every meal. The seventh and final food is sugary soda and sweetened drinks. A single can carry an enormous amount of sugar, with almost nothing else to offer the body alongside it. The traditional drink on my island, at every meal, was sunpin cha, jasmine green tea, unsweetened, poured freely like water. Researchers have studied green tea's catechins in relation to cardiovascular health for decades now. Here's how to make the swap stick. Brew a full pot of jasmine green tea in the morning. Steep loose leaves or a tea bag in just off-boil water for 2 to 3 minutes, and keep it in the fridge as cold tea for the rest of the day. Having it already made removes the moment of decision where soda usually wins. If plain tea feels like too big a jump from soda at first, Add a slice of fresh lemon or a few mint leaves to the pitcher. It adds brightness without added sugar, and most people find the transition easier with that small adjustment for the first week or two. Track how many cans or glasses of sugary drink you'd normally have in a day before you start. Most people are surprised by the number once they actually count it, and that number alone is often motivation enough. If you remember only one substitution from this entire video, let it be this one. So there they are, and exactly what to do about each one. Refined sugar, swap in steamed sweet potato and dark chocolate. Processed snacks, keep vegetables, edamame, and nuts within arm's reach. Red meat, swap tofu in for mince 2 or 3 days a week. Refined flour, check the label for buckwheat or whole grain first. Fried food, cook in a tablespoon of oil. Save deep fried for a weekly treat. Heavy dairy, simmered tofu in broth once a day. Sugary drinks, a pot of brewed tea ready before the craving hits. If it helps, here is the whole thing as a single shopping list for your next grocery trip. Sweet potatoes, dark chocolate above 80% cacao, a bag of frozen edamame, unsalted mixed nuts, a can of chickpeas, firm tofu, soba noodles, a loaf of true whole grain bread, brown rice, miso paste, and a box of loose jasmine green tea. That's 11 items, most of which keep for weeks in your pantry or freezer, and together they cover every single swap we just walked through. You don't need a specialty health food store for any of it. A normal grocery store carries all 11. None of this requires throwing out your kitchen tonight. It requires one swap this week, done consistently, before you add a second one next week. That's the entire method. No meal plan to memorize, no supplement to buy, just 7 small substitutions, one at a time. If you want a simple way to sequence this, here is the order I'd suggest, based on which swaps tend to be easiest first. Start with the drink swap. Brew the tea, keep it cold in the fridge, and let it replace whatever sugary drink you'd normally reach for. That alone takes less than 5 minutes of effort and removes a huge amount of added sugar from your week immediately. In week 2, add the snack swap. Get the vegetables, edamame, and nuts into your fridge and pantry so they're the easy option. By week 3, you can tackle the flour swap, simply by changing what bread and pasta you put in your cart. The red meat, dairy, and fried food swaps tend to go easier once the first 3 habits are already steady, because by then you're already cooking a little differently most days without having to think about it as hard. This isn't a strict rule. If a different order fits your life better, follow that instead. The only real rule is one swap at a time, held for at least a week before adding the next. One more practical thing worth knowing, how to actually tell if a swap is working, since the scale alone can be a slow and discouraging way to measure it. Watch instead for how you feel 2 to 3 hours after a meal. Steady energy instead of a crash is usually the first sign a swap is doing something. Watch your sleep over the following week. A lot of people notice they fall asleep easier once sugary drinks and late fried food come out of the evening rotation. And watch simple digestion. Less bloating after meals is common within the first 10 days of cutting back on refined flour and heavy fried food specifically. None of these are dramatic. They're exactly the kind of small, quiet signals my own family has always paid attention to, long before anyone called it tracking anything. Let me tell you plainly what is waiting for you inside the Okinawa Longevity Protocol, because I do not think you should hand over even $9.99 without knowing exactly what you are receiving for it. Inside, you will find the full seasonal eating calendar, the complete 30-day rhythm my own household still follows, the actual recipes for every swap I just mentioned, written simply enough to follow the first time, and the daily movement and ritual habits that go alongside the food itself. Think for a moment about what learning all of this a different way might cost you. A single visit to a nutritionist can run well over $100 for 1 hour of advice you have to remember entirely on your own afterward. A single specialty supplement bottle can cost $30 or $40 and empty itself within a month, asking to be bought again indefinitely. Compare that to $9.99 once, kept forever. I want to be honest with you about something else too. I cannot promise you that avoiding these 7 foods will add a single specific year to your life. Nobody honest can make that promise. What I can tell you is that this pattern, leaning toward whole food, leaning away from these 7 things, is the same pattern researchers keep finding decade after decade in the places where people seem to age the most gently. The 7 foods we've talked about today don't wait for a better time to start doing what they do. Every meal either moves you a little closer to this pattern or a little further from it. There is no neutral meal. If you would like the complete pattern my family has followed for generations, it is gathered in the Okinawa Longevity Protocol, less than what most people spend without thinking twice on a single one of the 7 foods we just went through. It is pinned in the comments below and in the description of this video right now. This week, pick just one of the 7 swaps and do it for the next 7 days. Not all 7 at once. That never sticks for anyone. Just one. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 surprised you the most and which swap are you starting with. I read every single one. Next time, I will show you the food that quietly took the place of all 7 of these on my island for generations, the purple sweet potato, and how to choose the sweetest one at the market every single time. Until then, eat what grew nearby, drink what came from a leaf and not a can, and start with just one swap tonight.